Training is part of the overall picture, part of the solution. It gives units and individuals the basic skills that they need to cope with most situations. But there are some cases where it just simply is not up to the task. So training is one element in performance, but not the only element. The basis for all training has to be core professional standards, which is what we expect from both soldiers and police. In other words, the ability to do their job. And what we expect from soldiers in particular is that their military skills should be at the level which is required for national defence. Peacekeeping is not an issue where you just wake up and go peacekeeping. You need to be professional. Over the top of that, we lay in the UN-specific requirements. Protection of civilians, command and control, working with police, working with civilian entities, working across organisations. We use online training as a means of providing information to people, to establishing a common platform, and we then test that when they arrive on course. And we use our course time for experiential activities where people need to work together to come to solutions to problems where there's a requirement for interaction or teamwork. So from our perspective, online training or as any form of e-learning, it's a great way of providing basic knowledge, but it doesn't substitute for the requirement to be able to interact with others, both within your team and across teams and across components. Pre-deployment training for uniformed personnel is the sole responsibility of member states for both troops and police. The background of that goes back to a General Assembly resolution called 49/37 from 1995. It makes my responsibility the provision of guidance, standards and training material. The delivery of that belongs to the member states. And we set certain standards that they are required to meet before they deploy. For uniformed personnel, we conduct what we call pre-deployment visits, and we look at their standards of equipment, their standards of training, and we make them to undertake a task which is required under the Statement of Unit Requirements. Once personnel get into mission, they become our responsibility, the United Nations responsibility. So in all of the large missions, we have what we call an Integrated Mission Training Centre or training team, which brings together military, police and civilian trainers. And what they do is they build on what has been provided before in terms of pre-deployment training. They deliver mission-specific and job-specific training. But because member states have the responsibility for the provision of pre-deployment training, if there are serious errors in that training, we don't have time to correct it. Hence, we're increasingly focusing now on the pre-deployment visits to verify the standards of training before deployment. In any mission on the ground, it's important that we're able to interact with 100% of the population, not 49% or 51%. And that need to be able to interact with everybody is one of the things that drives the requirement to increase the number of female peacekeepers. It's particularly important in protection of civilian situations where women are often segregated from men, and you need to be able to interact with that component of society. But equally, having a balanced mission allows you to incorporate many different views and to ensure that you've got diversity which helps to make for better decision making. It's easier with the police because police have had a longer history of bringing women through into frontline roles. For the military, it's much more difficult. And for some militaries, it's going to take a number of years before they can grow women into operational command roles at the colonel level. I mentioned the importance of the 50-50 male-female courses, with the 1 week beforehand being devoted entirely to women, focusing on their military skills and their driving skills. Because often women come to these courses without that necessary military background, and we need to find a way of levelling that playing field so that they are able to compete on a more equal basis with the male participants of the course. The second issue was, for countries which put forward women for these courses, it's vital that they actually then nominate them for peacekeeping operations because they're being trained for something, and it's important that we continue to push those women forward. It does two things. One, it conveys a message to the rest of their armed service or their police that women can move forward into these operational roles. But equally, in post-conflict societies, it conveys an important message to the women in those societies when they see other women from other countries doing professional jobs which they themselves would like to do. It makes it within the realm of the possible. We've got 128 troop and police contributing countries right now. Looking back over the last 5 years, the number has fluctuated somewhere between 120 and 130. So the number remains relatively static, but countries come in and countries go out as their needs change. So we have good relations with all of those countries who contribute forces to peacekeeping operations. And it's essential that we do because we expect them to deploy personnel trained to our standards. And the way that we are able to do that is by having the relationships with them to provide our material, to include them on courses, to make sure they understand what's required to operate effectively in an operation. We conduct joint exercises at the unit level as well as at the command level to make sure that commanders, military police and civilian are capable of working together, understanding the limitations that each has in their operations, plus the benefits and the advantages they have. The training service for peace operations is about 35 people, of whom 13 are focused on member state training. So we never train contingents. All of our work is done through training of trainers, always to build that national capacity. And we do things, as you saw here, with the Protection of Civilian course run by Colonel Pajovich, that you bring together multiple member states, you run them through a training of trainers program, and then you expect them to go home and deliver that training. And that's how we deal with the issue of scale. Cooperation between the European Union and the United Nations is governed by agreements that we have between the two entities. We meet regularly, we swap best practices, and because the member states of the European Union are often deploying to United Nations-led peacekeeping operations, they already have those training standards. So we have close relationships both with the European Union as a body, plus with the member states of the European Union.